In many cultures, it is customary to honor the dead. Filipinos do this by taking the time to pray the novena, visit a deceased loved one's grave, and on one day in particular, make it a family affair to visit the cemetery, spend the day at the site, and offer food to the dead. When my father was a teenager in Bukidnon, he had a friend named Jun. On the Day of the Dead, he decided that he would take advantage of his neighbor's festivities and take some of the food once everyone had left the cemetery. He told my father all about his plans. My father advised him not to do it and to respect the dead. But Jun didn't believe in spirits or the afterlife. He grabbed an empty sack from home and stayed hidden behind a tree while everyone sang, prayed, and offered food to the souls of their loved ones. On that night, the cemetery was lit up by candles and decorated with fresh flowers. The aroma of home-cooked meals lingered in the air, while everyone sat around, strumming their guitars and singing. He drooled while he eyed all the food he planned on feasting on later that night. Once the coast was clear and everyone left the site, he quietly walked over to numerous graves and started filling his sack up with the deceased one's favorite dish, such as pancit, adobo, and lumpia. It felt as if he had hit the jackpot. He wasn't alone.
Oy, kamusta?
No response. In fact, he didn't even acknowledge his presence.
Nadungog mo ba ko? Haskang bastosa ni mo baya.
So, Jun continued filling up his sack while snacking. Then, Jun couldn't stomach his treat anymore. A foul smell started to linger in the air. It smelled like rotten meat. He thought that maybe the food was starting to spoil after sitting around all day in the heat.
Nasimhot ni mo ka na?
Of course, no response. So Jun headed towards the gate with his sack full of food. He passed by the guy on his way out. The creature was stuffing his sack with pieces of a corpse. It looked over at Jun while holding an arm and growled. In a state of shock, Jun dropped everything he was carrying and ran towards the exit all the way home. He told his parents about what he did and apologized for trying to steal food. Anak, that was a balbal. You're lucky that it didn't harm or try to eat you. She explained to him that the balbal is a creature in the Philippines that steals corpses in the night and feeds on its rotting flesh. It has razor-sharp claws and teeth to tear through muscles and bones, and it releases a rancid stench when it feasts. The next day, Jun reported the incident to the policemen, and they hurried over to the cemetery. They reached the place the balbal was at and dug up the grave. They lifted up the heavy coffin, wondering if this was all a joke. But when they opened the coffin, there was a banana tree trunk left inside, with no trace of the corpse. When I was 19 years old, I lived with my Tito Berto in San Pablo, a rural town in Batanes located in the Luzon region. My parents were on a business trip and had decided that I should spend time with my Tito Berto over the summer. Tito Berto owned the largest mango farm in San Pablo. There were large trees that bore sweet yellow mangoes, sour green mangoes, and even exotic apple red mangoes. I would often help him and his farmers in gathering these mouth-watering fruits in large baskets every afternoon, before having a satisfying snack consisting of freshly made mango juice and banana bread. The farm was located near a forest, and every now and then I would usually go to the forest and take a relaxing walk. There was something about the forest that made it almost uncanny. It was either the fact that the trees were so dense that once you walk inside, you would think it was already nighttime, or because there were large shrubs and vines that grew around the path. Regardless, I liked walking in the forest. One day, after harvesting mangoes, I decided to take a break and walk into the forest. I put on my good walking shoes and headed towards the entrance of the forest. The air was clean and cold as I passed different plants and trees. I was walking even further when I suddenly heard a baby's cry. What was a baby doing in the forest? I thought as I followed the sound. The crying grew louder and louder until I reached a large mahogany tree whose roots were so huge that you could even sit on them. I looked for the place where the sound was coming from, and then I saw a small opening by the roots, and inside I saw a bundle. I got closer and reached in and touched it. I was startled when I heard a baby cry. I picked it up and undid the bundle and saw a small crying baby boy. "My God!" I exclaimed. "Why is there a baby here?" I tried to rock the baby to calm him down while looking around the forest. How did a baby end up here? Who would even think of leaving a baby out here, where it's cold, damp, and practically dangerous? While I was comforting the baby, I took a look at the baby's features. He was quite heavy for a little guy, and he had milky white skin and soft, black tufts of hair. I soon noticed that his cry was starting to grow deeper. It didn't sound like a little baby anymore. In fact, it sounded like an old man's laughter. I looked at the baby and blinked. The baby's closed eyes had opened to reveal sharp, black, angular eyes, and his soft, milk-white skin had grown wrinkled and brown like an oversized walnut. He had grown a long white beard, and his black tufts of hair had become gray and stringy. His one leg had also grown longer than the other. I gasped at the sight. The baby had become a small old man who started to laugh maniacally. I couldn't believe it. How could this cute baby suddenly turn into a creepy little man? The old man opened his mouth and showed he had large, sharp teeth. He suddenly lunged forward and sunk his teeth into my arm. I let out a cry of pain as I let go of him and stumbled back on the forest ground. Grunting in pain, I looked at the bite mark, and to my horror, there were black edges around the wound and a thick yellow substance leaking out of it. I heard the old man laugh and saw that he was now standing on his legs, and he was pointing at me as he started to run towards me. I scrambled up and, gripping the wounded arm, ran as fast as I could, all the while hearing the strange man's laugh echo all over the forest. I ran and ran until I reached the exit of the forest and ran across the field, all the way back to Tito Berto's farm. Upon seeing my wounded arm, Tito Berto asked me what happened, and I told him about the little baby who turned into a little, terrifying man. I could see Tito Berto's eyes widen with fear as he walked to the garden and plucked a handful of mango and guava leaves. He then chewed them up in his mouth before putting them on the wound. "Don't remove these leaves until I say so," he said. "You were very lucky." "Why?" I asked. This wound was caused by a tiyanak," he exclaimed. In folklore, a tiyanak was a dwarf that liked to pretend it was a baby. It usually stayed at the foot of a large tree and lures unsuspecting people with its cry. Once someone finds the tiyanak and picks it up, it transforms back into its grotesque form and either bites or enslaves the person. My Tito Berto added that if a tiyanak was found in a forest, the person could easily get lost forever, and if a tiyanak bit the person could get sick or worse. Ever since then, whenever I would visit Tito Berto, I try my best to avoid the forest as much as possible. I know it sounds silly, but every so often, when I'm near the entrance to the forest or any place with large trees, I hear a baby's cry followed by a low and menacing laughter.
Last year on Halloween, I was just sitting on my couch with a bottle of whiskey, watching sitcoms. My porch lights were off with a sign that read, "Sorry, no candy." I was laying on my couch about to pass out when I suddenly heard a knock on the door. I immediately jolted up, not because of the sound startling me, but because out of nowhere the feeling of dread and anxiety washed over me. It was 11 p.m. There was no need for anyone to knock on my door. Feeling lazy, I checked the security camera on my phone. I couldn't believe my eyes. So I quietly walked over to my front door, and with each step I took, my heart rate increased a beat. I stood several feet away from the door, debating whether or not to answer it. Then I heard a faint voice that sent chills down my spine.
Emma, are you home? We were supposed to go trick-or-treating tonight.
What the hell? Gabby? I thought I was going to faint, but snapped out of it and told myself that it was just in my head.
Emma, why aren't you opening the door? I told my parents I was spending the night at your place. I've been waiting for you.
I mustered up enough confidence to walk over to my front door, take a deep breath, and look through the peephole. Immediately, my eyes began to sting as tears rolled down. My vision was a little blurry, but I knew who it was.
Gabby? Is that you? Yes, silly. Now open the door. We still have time to watch our annual Hocus Pocus.
I wiped away the tears, but I couldn't find the courage to open the door. For some reason, I couldn't utter a sound. I was feeling a mix of emotions from shock to excitement, to sadness to fear.
Emma, it's getting cold. Stop playing games and open the door.
I made up my mind. This was the moment I had been waiting for. It was absurd, yes, but that was my best friend. Hold on. I turned on the porch lights and cracked open the door. My chain lock was still attached as I got a closer look at Gabby. I smiled as I saw that she was wearing her favorite flannel that I gave her on her 10th birthday. She took a step closer and was about to walk in. However, when the light hit her face, fear washed over me again, and I slammed the door shut.
Emma, why'd you do that? Let me in.
Gabby didn't look like the Gabby I knew and loved. Her pupils were dilated and pitch black. She was incredibly pale and thin.
Emma, hurry up. I think someone's coming.
I don't know who you are, but you're not my Gabby. Please leave.
What are you talking about? You sound scared. I just want to give you a hug. Open the door.
Get out, please, before I call the cops. I'm sorry.
Emma!
I called the police, and immediately after hanging up, the knocking stopped. I looked out the peephole again, and she was gone. Halloween used to be my favorite day of the year as a child. Now I do all I can to avoid it. On this particular Halloween, I didn't even want to exist. It had been 10 years since my childhood best friend went missing after trick-or-treating with me. I'm not sure if I was hallucinating that night, but after talking to a few people and posting on Reddit, people believe that what I saw was a black-eyed child. I am convinced that my childhood best friend turned into one. I just want to know how and why. Halloween is, or at least was, my favorite time of the year. I never got scared during Halloween, I just loved it. Being in a small town though, I never got to experience typical attractions like a haunted house where a monster chases you. But last year, well, let's just say that things got a little scarier. Around September, as I was walking around town, I started to see some flyers that advertised the opening of a Halloween attraction. Yes, I cheerfully said, as I began to read the details. The old abandoned house right outside of town was bought, and soon it would be turned into something scarier than anything you've ever experienced. I got so excited. Fast forward to Halloween night, I took a nap and was ready to go. It was called the House of Nightmares. The name was, I don't know, okay, I guess. It didn't inspire fear or anything, maybe just curiosity. The purpose was to go from room to room after knocking on each door, and in the final room, number 3, something really scary was going to happen. Being the fearless adventurer that I was, I couldn't wait. Soon I was outside the house. I opened the front door, and the only thing I could see was another door with a number 1 on it. I rushed over to it. I tried opening the door, but it was locked. Then I remembered the knocking part, and as expected, after I knocked, it opened. This room was full of Halloween decorations, from fake spiderwebs to glowing pumpkins. Really scary, I thought to myself. I walked over to door number 2, right next to a plastic skeleton. When I knocked, a huge spider fell on me, then the door opened. Okay, that made me jump a little. Someone then pushed me inside, and the door slammed shut. Okay, this room was dark, and when I say dark, I mean that I could not see a thing. As I aimlessly walked around the room, I stumbled across a little table that had a candle and some matches on it. I lit up the candle, and the only thing I could see was an old cracked mirror on the wall, but no door. I walked towards the mirror, and as I got closer, I could hear a growl, louder and louder with each step I took. The mirror didn't reflect me. Inch by inch, a silhouette started to form, and when I was right in front of the mirror, a growl seemed to be coming from right behind me. I let out a powerful scream and collapsed to the ground. The growl turned into a woman crying, "Not long now." Finally, the crying turned into a laughter so sinister that it paralyzed my entire body, and the mirror I was looking into fell and broke into a million pieces. I opened my eyes and the room was perfectly lit up and empty. Door number 3 was right there in front of me. Eager to get out of there now, I knocked and went into the last room. As I took my first step, I turned around and the door through which I entered disappeared. I heard, "There's no turning back." I turned my head one more time and I saw a lady dressed in a white gown sitting on the floor, but behind her was a dark shadow. It wasn't hers and it wasn't mine. I asked, "What is going on here? I want to get out." She stood up and levitated towards me. At that moment, I thought that I was going to shit myself. As I had my back against the wall, she came closer and closer, finally touching my face with her cold hand. I closed my eyes, hoping that she would go away, and I felt like I was sinking. She was pushing me down to the ground, and I couldn't fight back, and just kept screaming. I was afraid to open my eyes. "Let go of me," she laughed. All of a sudden, I could feel a cold breeze. I opened my eyes, and there I was on my street, surrounded by trick-or-treaters, as if nothing happened. They were pointing and laughing at me. I looked down. It turns out I shit myself after all. As I opened the door to the coffee house, I was enveloped by the scent of fresh brewed coffee, pastries baking in the oven, and the sound of joyous laughter and conversation. Then I heard a familiar voice call out, "Sarah, over here!" I whipped my head around to see my oldest and best friend Kate, sitting on the edge of her seat waving at me. Kate and I went back as far as I could remember, but we haven't seen each other since we left for separate colleges. However, with summer break's blessing, we are finally meeting again. Kate, my goodness, look at you. You look amazing. How have you been? I exclaimed while quickly making my way over to her and throwing my arms around her. So great, Sarah. I missed you big time. It's so good to see you again, she said, pulling slightly out of our embrace with a smile from ear to ear. We talked and sipped our coffee for a while, talking about classes, people we met, and dishing out the gossip about our love lives. After what felt like hours of laughter, there was a slight pause in conversation, and I noticed that Kate had a sullen look on her face. "You okay?" I asked, with a fringe of concern. "Yeah. Hey, do you remember at all?" she asked, after a moment of hesitation. I saw her lips move, but didn't hear any sound come out. "Sorry, it's a little loud in here. Can you repeat that? Do you remember who used to live a few houses down from us?" This time there was no mistaking it. She was trying to say a name, but there was only silence. I leaned back, and then a flash of a memory came to me of Kate and I, but also another girl whose name, face, and voice were just static. Other memories came back slowly, and in them, there was a third girl, wherever Kate and I were, but when I tried to focus on her, it's like she'd been cut out of a photograph. "Sarah, something weird happened to me before I left. I was at my apartment, just playing around on my computer, and I felt this overwhelming urge to look outside. I saw a man wearing a suit round a corner of the building across the street. He was really tall, like well over 7 feet. I don't know why, but seeing him really freaked me out. All that night, all I could think about was you and me, and that third girl who we used to play with. But I can't remember what she looked like, and it's like my mouth knows her name, but I can't speak it or even think about it. It's been creeping me out since, and I was really hoping you'd know what I was talking about. Since we're confessing about creepy things, I guess I'll share something that happened to me too. When I got to my parents' house last night, my dad told me they had received a letter for me that morning, which is strange because only you and they knew I'd be coming back for the summer. It was just a piece of lined paper that said, "Welcome home," in scratchy black letters, and below it was a circle with an X going through it. I thought it was some weird prank, but I stopped dead in my tracks as something suddenly popped into my head. Kate, do you remember that scary monster character we made up? The Slender Man? No sooner had the words left in my mouth, I saw all the color leave Kate's face, and her expression turned from vague anxiety to complete dread. Her eyes shot up, and she erupted out of her seat, incoherently muttering as she pointed behind me. I whipped my head around and immediately saw what frightened her. I saw a man peering at us from outside the window across the darkened street. His limbs were grotesquely long and exaggerated. He wore a black suit with a black tie and a white-collared shirt, and most horrifying of all, his head was completely featureless, just smooth and pale white all over. There was no mistaking it. He was the Slender Man.